Good morning, and today we want to talk about Freud's personality development. And a lot has been said about that, and I'm sure you have been in some classes in regard to this, but I want to speak in regard to something that is misunderstood between the id and the superego. And before I can do that, I guess I need to give some background into those ideas. Of course, when we speak of the id, the ego, and the superego, we are talking about something that is more or less an explanation. It's Sigmund Freud's explanation of how personality is developed. So, of course, there's no physical part in the brain that's called the id or the superego. You wouldn't open up the brain and find anything in there like you would find the hypothalamus or anything like that. But it is an explanation that Freud came up with as to how personality was developed. And so, as you may recall in some textbooks from an introduction to psychology, you see an iceberg. And when you come up on the iceberg, you see that which is visible above the water. What you don't see is the huge amount of the iceberg that is beneath the water. And so it would be with our subconscious and conscious parts of our personality, and which is to say, we recognize our behavior, we recognize our thoughts, we recognize moods or actions, behavior. We're aware of those things, and so that would be like the part of our personality that is seen, like the top of the iceberg. Many times what we don't understand, or what is in the unconscious, or what is beneath consciousness, as we don't understand what's going on, is some of the motivations, some of the drives, some of the instincts. Of course, that would be referred to by Freud as the id. Many times we'll behave certain ways. We don't know why. I don't know why I get mad when that happens. Different things about our behavior that we can see, but we don't understand the motivations behind it. And so Freud says that part that you do not understand is beneath the consciousness, and that would be the id. So what is the id? That's where we'll start. That is a German word. But the closest we would get to it in an English-speaking situation would be it. And the way I relate that, we've heard people speak of other people say, oh, they just think they're it, which is to refer to the idea that they are full of themselves, self-centered. They think they're it. Well, to some degree, that would be the id, in that it's very self-focused and that it is primarily there to bring about one's own pleasure for the self. It's always thinking of the self. And that's the way it is when we're born. When we're born, we don't have any other choice but because of drive. That sounds like determinism, but we don't think in terms of others when we're born. A baby doesn't lay in its crib at night and it's hungry, or a wet diaper, and say, well, I'm miserable and I'm hungry, but I know mom's asleep, so I'll just let her sleep later, and then when she gets up, then I'll cry and let her know. No, babies don't act like that. When they're hungry or when they're wet, it doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the morning or not, they're going to start crying then. They don't think in terms of how it's affecting others and that sort of thing. And so it is with the id, and babies, so to speak, you could think in terms of the id being above the water, above in the consciousness when we're born, and so the id is above the water line, the awareness line. It's in our consciousness when we're born. But then as we grow up, a lot of our behaviors as children, where we were self-focused, we're doing things for ourselves, we're doing things that's inappropriate, we're doing things that's unseemingly in society, whatever that might be. The superego comes into play. Now we start this discussion of the superego, which means this is society's influence on the individual. Much of our behavior is based on drive and the seeking of pleasure. But now society comes alongside of us and say, no, you can't act like that. We would even recognize religious ideas here, as that's a part of a larger setting of society. We have things like the Ten Commandments that say, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that, thou shalt not kill, do not steal, don't commit adultery, these type of things. And so that would be recognized, as Freud would put it, as the superego. Society's influence on us as an individual. And here's the id in the conscious area. Now then here comes the superego, and it begins to quench, I don't know a better word there, to push the id into the unconscious. We can't act like that. We can't do those things. We can't behave in that way. And so people think, oh, well, I'll just quit doing that. Well, you don't get rid of the id. We just push it into the unconscious, and it's still there. The drives are still there. The motivations of the id is still there. It's just that society pushes that down into the unconscious. And so it's always there to be contended with. And now superego is there, and we are behaving in a way that is acceptable to society. We're thinking of others. We're not putting ourselves out there in a way that it's all about us. And this plays into all types of things in our life. But then to get to the point of this idea at this point, is a lot of times it's explained that the superego and the id is like the good angel, the superego on this shoulder, and the id, the devil, is on this shoulder, and we kind of, which one we going to go with, which one, and you know, it's really not like that. It's like this is where the discussion of the third part of this Freud's personality development comes in, with the ego. The ego is the balancing act between the superego and the id, where we're not, the ego isn't going to let us, if it's a strong ego, it's not going to let us be all about others. It will keep us in mind as well, but it's not going to let us be all about ourselves. It's going to keep others in mind as well. And when a good personality is developed, when a strong personality is developed, and that might not be the best term either, but a healthy personality is developed, there's going to be times that I'm going to be thinking of others, never doing anything that would be harmful to others, but at the same time, I recognize that I keep pointing to my shoulders, but that the id desires is satisfied as well. That it's never just the superego or just the id. It's a balance between the two, that I'm thinking of others, but I'm also thinking of what it is I desire as well. Where with the superego, if it was all the superego, you would be quick to be run over by others all the time, and you would really have this codependent thing going on where you're always trying to be pleasing to everybody constantly, never thinking of yourself. Whereas if you was totally going with the id, you'd be narcissistic, hurting everyone's feelings all the time, only thinking of yourself. And either one of those extremes would not be a healthy personality. So the ego helps us balance that, to think in terms of being there, thinking of others, also thinking what is best for me at the same time. So I think that is the misconception sometimes of the superego and the id, that we're going to go with either one or the other. But the healthy personality, with Freud's term, the ego, balances us between those two. And Even when we think in terms of what is referred to as altruism, and this is a selfless act, always thinking in terms of others, doing for others. Altruism is selfless act. And is there a true selfless act? Somewhere in our thinking of others, in our doing for others, somewhere in our altruistic behavior, we find some satisfaction in that for ourselves, which appeases the id. That somewhere the id is appeased in that, uh, and that we are doing for others. Anyway, is there a true altruistic act, or even in our altruism, are we somehow bringing about satisfaction for ourselves as well, which somehow kind of takes away from it being selfless? Okay, well, there are some ideas, and so there is what we want to recognize is that it's not either the superego or the id, but with the help of the ego, it's a balance between the two. So, thank you very much, and we'll go with that.